It's a common expression in football to hear that a team bought their success. Manchester City and PSG are frequently accused of having bought Premier League and Ligue 1 titles under state-backed Emirati and Qatari ownership regimes. Birmingham City were accused of the same in League 1 last season, and even further down the pyramid, the likes of Salford, Fleetwood and Wrexham have all been accused of buying promotion from the non-league game. What's meant by that term is that those teams have been bankrolled to success, benefiting from a sugar daddy in some form, whether that be a nation-state, asset management firm, or a couple of Hollywood actors, allowing them to buy better players, appoint better staff, and become a more successful team as a result. What's not meant, typically, is that they have literally bought success. In the case of club Esportu Atlètic Lleida, however, one of the lesser-known teams in Catalonia, that is precisely what they have done. Founded in 2019 by a consortium of wealthy and well-connected local businessmen, Atlètic Lleida have been promoted 4 times in 5 years, but only a single one of those promotions was based upon sporting merit. Athletic have repeatedly bought the playing licenses of other clubs from their very inception, allowing them to climb Catalonia's non-league ranks and reach the 4th tier of Spanish football, Segunda B, in record time, becoming the region's most controversial club in the process. Lleida is a city that has been battered and bruised by centuries of conflicts. The 6th largest city in Catalonia and among the oldest in all of Spain, Lleida has been ruled by Iberian tribes, the Romans, the Visigoths, Arab Muslims, often referred to as the Moors, the Franks, the Moors again, Christians under the Count of Barcelona, the Spanish, the Habsburgs, the Bourbons, the French, the Spanish, briefly by the French again under Napoleon, and then the Spanish again, though not without great resistance. Julius Caesar's forces defeated Pompey's in Lleida in 49 BC. The city was the scene of an infamous battle and siege less than 2 years apart during the Reapers' War, and it was relentlessly bombed by the Franquist faction during the Spanish Civil War, including the bombing of a school by fascist Italian aviation forces supporting Franco in 1937, in which 48 children and teachers were killed. The only civilian ever killed by the Catalan separatist group TLL was in Lleida in 1987, when a bomb planted by the group at the city's courthouse inadvertently collapsed the wall of an adjacent house and killed a 62-year-old woman. There is an entire Wikipedia page titled Battles and Sieges of Lleida, which features 16 separate entries dating from 49 BC to 1938. Now the city of Lleida is at war again, but this time with itself. And like all of the bitterest and most hateful conflicts, it is one about football. So sit back, relax, and join me on a journey to the western fringes of Catalonia, closer to Zaragoza than Barcelona, as we take a look at a football club seemingly determined to steal MK Dons' title of being the world's most hated 4th tier club, how they have quite literally bought their way to the 4th tier in only 5 years, and whether they could climb all the way to La Liga without ever actually winning promotion on sporting merit.
It can't go on like this, can it?
It can.
Lleida isn't a name or city that will be familiar with most people or football fans outside of Spain, yet both within and outside of the sport, its history is considerable. The city sits at a crossroads, politically, militarily, and culturally. Cut in half by the Segre, which is a tributary to the 580-mile river Ebro, Lleida is a city of bridges. The largest city in the Catalan Central Depression, Lleida lies to the south of the foothills of the Pyrenees, to the north of the Catalan coastal range, and just 10 miles from the western edge of Catalonia. The city therefore controls access, from varying directions, to the Catalan coast, the Pyrenees, and the central Ebro Basin, or Ebro in Spanish. That's why it has historically been of such strategic importance, even when it had a tiny population, and why it has seen such extensive conflict. Football arrived in Lleida at the beginning of the 1900s, courtesy of a man named Manuel Azos. A tall, strong, mustachioed man, at a time when 5'5" constituted a tall man, Azos had become familiarised with football in Barcelona before taking a job working in an oil factory in Lleida in 1910. Legend has it that Azos took his football shirt, shorts and socks with him to Lleida, therefore becoming the city's first full-kit wanker, and proceeded to walk down to a local green called the Campo de Marte and kick a ball about every day, where locals would walk past and watch on with bemusement at what this strange man was doing. After a number of days, though, some children and soldiers tried to join in. Most of them were supposedly comically dreadful, missing the ball entirely, tripping over their own feet, and unable to control it when he kicked it to them. It turned out that he had inadvertently stumbled upon the 2024-25 Man United team. Azaz only spent 2 years living in Lleida, but in that time, he gave the city's approximately 25,000 residents the football bug, and there are certainly worse diseases to catch from a mustachioed Spaniard in the 1910s. Yes, it's a syphilis joke. Although it was certainly no joke at the time, of course, as it spread like wildfire and penicillin hadn't yet been discovered. Football also spread like wildfire in Lleida, as clubs like Montserrat, Lleida FC and Juventus sprang up, and in 1918, the local municipality built the Camp des Sports to reflect football's growing popularity. A state-of-the-art venue at the time, boasting a main stand, open terraces, and what was, at that time, an impressive surface, Lleida FC became the stadium's first occupants in 1919, but within 8 years, they were dead. It wasn't syphilis, the club was just dissolved due to financial trouble. After the Spanish Civil War wrought devastation upon Lleida and much of Catalonia, 3 clubs from the city merged to form Lleida Balompié AEM, though they would later split into 2 teams, Lleida Balompié and AEM. The city's strongest side pre-war had been FC Juventus, which was founded by left-wing Catalan Republicans, but in 1941, Spanish nationalists founded CD Lleidano, which soon developed a spicy rivalry with Lleida Balompié for pretty obvious reasons. Lleida had become Lerida following the Spanish Civil War, which is the city's Spanish name, because Franco wasn't especially keen on expressions of Catalan language or culture. In fact, if anything, he appeared to be quite spiteful towards it at times. The 2 rivals merged in 1947 though, which was thankfully the end of any animosity between the Spanish and the Catalans, forming UD Lerida, retaining the blue and white of Lleida Balompié in what proved to be an instant success. Back-to-back promotions in 1949 and 1950 saw Lerida climb from the 3rd tier to La Liga, but in their first season in Spain's top flight, Lerida were spectacularly bad. The Blues were not just immediately relegated, finishing bottom of the league, they lost 23 games, only won 13 points, and conceded a quite incredible 134 goals in only 30 games. That's an average of almost 4.5 goals conceded per game, and 75 years on, it is still the highest number of goals that a team has ever conceded in a La Liga season, despite the fact that it was a 16-team league at the time, meaning that teams played 8 fewer matches over the course of a season than they do now. Lleida didn't return to the top flight until the 1993-94 season, and they were Lleida again by then, as Franco had been dead nearly 20 years. Again, also not syphilis, antibiotics had been discovered by now. He actually died of a broken heart after he overheard someone speaking Catalan. Coached by the great Basque manager Mane, who later took Alaves from the Segunda Division to a UEFA Cup final, Lleida put up a much better fight in their second season in the top flight, and their first in over 40 years. They were still relegated, but only narrowly, finishing 3 points below the relegation playoff line, and they only conceded 48 goals, which was not only much better than their record 134 goals that they conceded last time out, it was only 6 more than title winners Barcelona conceded that season. What's more, Lleida completed the rare feat, and practically unheard of among newly promoted and ultimately relegated clubs, of beating both Real Madrid and Barcelona in the same season. It is just a shame that they only won 5 other games. Mane was one of 3 famous Lleida bosses within the space of only 5 years, along with Juan de Ramos from 1997 to 1998, who went on to manage Real Betis, Sevilla and Real Madrid, and Barcelona legend Victor from 1999 to 2000, who subsequently coached the likes of Villarreal, Real Zaragoza, and Panathinaikos. Following Mane, Ramos, and Victor's departures, though, Lleida fell into the 3rd tier in 2001, beginning a chain of events which would lead to the club's collapse. The Blues spent heavily, in relative terms, in a bid to return to the Segunda Division, which they did in 2004, but only for 2 seasons. They were relegated again in 2007, and by 2011, the club had debts totaling €27.2 million and rising, which were impossible to repay as a third-tier club. In June 2010, Lleida's largest shareholder, Tacho Benet, quit the club, transferring all of his shares to the businesswoman Annabel Junyents. In May 2011, 3 days after their final game of the season, Lleida were formally liquidated and the club was dissolved, despite the fact that they had just finished 5th in Group 3 of the Segunda Division B, only missing out on the playoffs by 3 points, having failed to provide a viability plan to repay their outstanding debts. Local businessman Cisco Puyol, who was the president of nearby EFAC Almasias, acquired the club's vacated league license, founding a Phoenix club, Lleida Esportu, as a continuation of the original club. Lleida Esportu had a virtually identical badge to UE Lleida, the same nickname, imagery, stadium, and even manager, as Emile Vicente, Lleida's manager since 2008, agreed to stay on and take charge of the new club, in inverted commas. Following a 7th place finish in their debut campaign, Lleida qualified for the promotion playoffs in 4 out of the next 5 seasons, including in the 2015-16 season, where they only lost 5-4 on penalties against Sevilla's reserves in the playoff final. That was a real sliding doors moment for Lleida Esportu, given what was to come next. The day after being granted UE Lleida's third-tier league license, Cisco Puyol walked out on Lleida, citing irrevocable differences when it came to the allocation of the club's shares among board members. Puyol was replaced by Albert Esteva, who became acting club president, meanwhile his brother Jordi Esteva became Lleida's sporting director. Between them, the Esteva brothers effectively ran Lleida into the ground. Again. Despite multiple playoff campaigns and coming within a penalty shootout of a Segunda Division return, off the pitch, there were complaints from both players and the AEAT, Spain's tax authority, over the non-payment of wages and debts. Their mismanagement also led to a breakdown in Lleida's relationship with the local council or city hall, known as La Paeria in Lleida, who own the Camp de Sport, Lleida's long-term home ground. La Paeria, under multiple mayors, grew frustrated at Lleida's lack of maintenance of the Camp de Sport, alleging that the brothers had not only mismanaged both the city's club and stadium, but also that they had violated the terms of the contract by which Lleida rented the stadium from the council. According to reports, documented by Tony Padilla in the Catalan daily newspaper Ara, there were bird nests in areas of the stadium that hadn't been cleaned or maintained in months, along with allegations of items having gone missing from Lleida's neglected on-site museum. Even more seriously, the club's offices were raided by the civil guard, with directors accused of falsifying documents and charged with fraud. In the 2017-18 season, Lleida made it through to the round of 16 of the Copa del Rey, beating Real Sociedad before being on the receiving end of a thrashing from Atletico Madrid, in what was both the Phoenix club's best cup run and biggest scalp, but in the league, they had slipped out of the playoff places. This was a major problem because, in the 2021-22 season, in the immediate aftermath of the COVID pandemic, the RFEF majorly restructured Spanish football, creating a much smaller third tier, known as the Segunda Federación, which would be made up of only 2 groups, to replace the Segunda Division B, which was made up of 5. The hope was to professionalise the third tier of Spanish football, making Spain a nation of 3 full-time professional leagues, with greater integration between La Liga, the Segunda Division, and the Segunda Federación, but in the 2020-21 season, it meant relegating a whopping 26 teams from the third to either the 4th tier Segunda Federación or the 5th tier Tercera Federación. Lleida finished 7th and 4th in the 2 phases of the 2020-21 season, avoiding the worst possible fate of dropping into the Tercera, but still becoming a 4th tier team for the first time in the history of the Phoenix club, and for the first time since 1970, including UE Lleida. Whereas Lleida won an immediate promotion back in the 70-71 season, in their only 4th tier campaign over the last 80 years, this time an escape would prove to be much more difficult. To make matters worse, in January 2022, La Paeria, led by Mayor Miquel Pueyo, voted unanimously to withdraw Lleida's right to play at the Camp de Sport, potentially leaving the club homeless. 2 days earlier, the Esteva brothers had agreed a deal to relinquish control of Lleida, selling the club to Luis Pereira Barreiro. A Galician former Lleida player turned Swiss-based businessman, Pereira spent a single season playing for UE Lleida at the beginning of the 1980s, having previously played top-flight football with Celta Vigo. Hailed as a saviour by supporters at the time, things fairly quickly soured. Pereira, along with his deputy president Marc Torres, have complained that La Paeria never accepted them as being a new regime, distinct from the Esteva brothers, and had already made up their minds to kick the team out of the Camp de Sports. Torres told our newspaper, quote, "They didn't give us time to explain our project," adding, quote, "If they kick us out of the Camp de Sports, the club will die, because there is no other stadium that meets the necessary conditions." End quote. Lleida, under Pereira, launched an appeal against La Paeria's eviction in July 2022, but in February of this year, almost 3 years on, the administrative court dismissed the club's appeal and upheld the decision of the City Hall. That ruling isn't final, as Lleida continue to appeal it via the courts, but it is further complicated by the fact that two teams have been granted permission by La Paeria to move into the stadium this season. One of them is SEAEM, Lleida's leading women's team, who compete in the Segunda Federación, which is the second tier of women's football in Spain. AEM's junior team famously won a boys' league in 2017, mixed-sex football is allowed in Spain until the age of 14, when they won 21 out of their 22 matches in the men's second league. AEM played their first ever game at Camp de Sport on Sunday, a pre-season friendly against Badalona women, and Lleida's season ticket holders will have free access to AEM games this season, meaning that, somewhat unusually, their supporters will be guaranteed to be able to watch at least one team's games at the Camp de Sport this season, just maybe not their own. The other club is Club Esportu Atlètic Lleida, who were founded in 2019, and who this video is actually about. Yes, I know. It took me long enough. Hey look, don't ever say that I don't provide sufficient context on this channel. In a real villain arc, one of the key figures behind Atlètic Lleida, as part of a consortium that founded the club just 6 years ago, is Cisco Puyol, better known as Kiko, the former EFAC Almacias president, who bought UE Lleida's league license back in 2011 after the club was liquidated, and effectively founded Lleida Esportu as a Phoenix club before walking out after just 2 days due to share allocation disagreements. I know that things could get a bit confusing in terms of similar names at this stage, so just to be absolutely clear, I will say UE Lleida when referring to the original club, who played in La Liga and were dissolved in 2011, just Lleida when referring to Lleida Esportu, who are now named Lleida CF, the Phoenix club who replaced the original club, and just Athletic when referring to Club Esportu Atlètic Lleida, the new club who were founded by a wealthy consortium in 2019. So there's nothing confusing about that. When Athletic were founded, their name, Club Esportu Atlètic Lleida, was disputed by the pre-existing Lleida Esportu for being too similar and potentially causing confusion. Surely not. Lleida's dispute was unsuccessful though, and in 2024, it was they who changed their name to Lleida CF, citing their registered trademark having expired in 2023, and an unnamed entity, whoever could that be, having laid claim to it. Instead of fighting to retain their trademark in the courts, which Lleida claimed would have been an unwise allocation of human and financial capital at the already cash-strapped club, Lleida removed the Esportu from their own name, attempting to spin it as a positive and a break from their recent troubled past. As it transpired, their troubles have only intensified over the last 12 months. Atlètic Lleida reached an agreement with EFAC Almacias in 2020, where Cisco Puyol had been president until 2017, to officially merge with Almacias, but effectively to subsume them while acquiring their license to compete in the Primera Catalana, the fifth tier of Spanish football at the time, far higher than the level at which Athletic would otherwise have entered the Spanish Football League pyramid as a brand new club, which is typically the 10th tier, meaning that they had effectively skipped 5 divisions. Puyol has since joined the board of directors at FC Barcelona under the presidency of Joan Laporta. In the great reorganization of Spanish football in 2021-22, which saw Lleida drop from the 3rd to the 4th tier, Atlètic Lleida also fell from the 5th to the 6th tier, despite remaining in the Primera Catalana, which just fell one place within the pyramid. Whereas the restructuring came as a hammer blow to Lleida, combined with COVID and pre-existing mounting debts, Athletic were able to take it all in their stride, not least because when Catalan football underwent its own reorganization in the 2023-24 season, Athletic secured a de jure promotion despite winning neither the league nor the playoffs. In 2023, the Primera Catalana's status was further diminished as it became a 7th-tier league within the wider Spanish Football League pyramid. Please bear with me, I know this might get confusing, but I promise you we will be back to syphilis before long. Owing to the creation of a new 6th-tier Superliga Catalana, since renamed the Liga Elite, designed to create an elite regional Catalan league just below the Segunda Federación. Athletic became founding members of this Liga Elite in 2023-24 where, in the league's first ever season, they were promoted yet again. Despite finishing 6th during the regular season, this was actually Athletic's only promotion to date based solely upon sporting merits, as they beat Villatenim 4-3 over a 2-leg playoff final to clinch promotion to the Tercera Federación. It was Athletic's 3rd league in as many seasons, but for the 3rd straight season, they would be going straight up. Only the winners of each of the 18 groups in Spain's truly enormous regionally subdivided Tercera Federación are guaranteed promotion to the almost as enormous Segunda Federación, meanwhile those ranked from 2nd to 5th qualify for the promotion playoffs. Athletic finished 2nd, 10 points behind title-winning Royce, and in the playoffs, they lost 3-2 against Badalona in the semi-finals, who themselves lost 3-1 against Girona B in the final, the latter of whom were duly promoted alongside Royce. While all of this was going on though, as Athletic steadily bought their way up the Catalan rungs of the Spanish Football League pyramid, Lleida Esportu, or Lleida CF, the city's original club's financial problems were worsening. The club's debts, under former player Luis Pereira, had only grown, as high salaries were paid out and there was a high turnover of players in a desperate, but ultimately unsuccessful bid to win promotion. Last season, Pereira admitted, as had been the case with the original UE Lleida by 2011, that the club was no longer financially viable. Debts had spiralled to more than €5 million according to reports, the vast majority of which, €4.8 million, is owed to the Spanish Treasury and Social Security. Worse still, players had gone unpaid. As a result, at the end of last season, Lleida's Segunda Federación license was revoked, and they were administratively relegated to the Tercera Federación. That put a spot in the Segunda Federación up for grabs, so long as someone was willing to cough up the €288,920 payment to the RFEF at auction. Yeah, I think I know someone. In what can only be described as a not universally celebrated move, Atlètic Lleida have not only secured a deal to move into the Camp de Sport, Lleida CF, and previously UE Lleida's longtime home stadium, they've also now bought Lleida CF's Segunda Federación League place, usurping their city rivals in the Spanish Football League pyramid, and becoming Lleida's premier club in the process. Athletic weren't the only club to bid for Lleida's league place. L'Hospitalet and Badalona, the latter of whom beat Athletic in last season's Tercera Federación playoffs, both stated their intent and were willing to stump up the necessary cash, but Athletic were favoured ahead of them by virtue of having finished higher in the table during the regular league season. Cornellà, Peña Deportiva, Alzira, Mallorca B and Badalona Fator, the 5 teams relegated from the Segunda Federación last season, were the RFEF's preferred bids to take Lleida's 4th-tier status, and therefore retain their own, but none of them were willing to stump up the cash. Cornellà still claimed that the place is rightfully theirs, on sporting merit, having finished 1 place below Lleida last season in the final automatic relegation spots. Ironically, Athletic actually held negotiations with Badalona Fator, very controversially, about acquiring their Segunda Federación license in 2024, prompting an angry response from supporters. And now Badalona Fator have been relegated to the Tercera Federación, having failed to take up the option to buy Lleida's old Segunda Federación license, which Athletic have taken up. The system of being able to buy league places, whether that be in the division above or by buying a place in a league that you've just been relegated from, is a controversial one, which may seem alien to some viewers outside of Spain. The precedent was set in 2007 when Granada 74 jumped from the Regional Preferente to the Segunda Division, Spain's second tier, by buying second-tier Ciudad de Murcia, based in Murcia, for an enormous €20 million and relocating the team to Granada, a la MK Dons, though, officially speaking, Granada 74 constituted a brand new club. It was a move made possible by a 2007 rule change approved by the LFP, which critics described as making money more important than matches in Spanish football. The project, financed by businessman Carlos Marsa, was an utter failure. Granada 74 had no supporters and no stadium due to a fractured relationship with both locals and the local council, who unsurprisingly took the side of Granada's pre-existing club, Granada CF, despite Granada 74 having bought a place in the division above them. In their debut campaign, Granada 74 were relegated, while playing in a pretty much empty 4,400 capacity stadium 20 miles outside of Granada. The following season, they were relegated yet again, and at the end of that second season, and second relegation, Marsa dissolved the club. €20 million well spent, I'm sure you'd agree. The system has been exploited, or utilised depending on your perspective, by a couple of clubs since then, the most well known of whom being FC Andorra, who are owned by Gerard Piqué. Languishing in the 5th tier when the Barcelona legend bought the club in 2018, and the 7th tier not that long before that, the club from the tiny landlocked principality now competes in the Segunda Division, thanks partly to paying the RFEF €452,022 to skip the 4th tier of Spanish football entirely, going straight from the Primera Catalana to the Segunda Division B in 2019. Andorra replaced Royce, who were administratively relegated due to financial issues, before winning promotion to the Segunda Division in 2022. Whereas previous league place acquisitions have been one-offs though, like Granada 74 and FC Andorra, Spanish football is now dealing with a club with very little grassroots support but wealthy backers, who are hell-bent on climbing Spanish football's professional ranks by any means necessary, and those means have so far been primarily financial and legal, as opposed to being based upon sporting merit. One could argue that almost all professional football is now based solely upon finances. Manchester City, with English football's highest net spend since the Emiratis bought the club in 2008, have won 6 out of the last 8 Premier League titles. PSG, the European champions, have the highest wage bill in world football. Chelsea, the Club World Cup champions, have spent €1.7 billion over the last 3 years, which is close to double any other club. What is the meaningful difference between a system whereby the clubs who spend the most money win the most points, finish highest in the league table and win the most trophies, and one where they can formalise that process and just buy points, league places, and trophies directly? Rhetorically, that might be quite a persuasive argument, but inherently, I think we all know that there is a difference, and instinctively it just feels wrong. Atlètic Lleida, theoretically, could reach La Liga without winning a single league title or playoff campaign, just by picking off the licenses of bankrupted and dissolved clubs. Some Lleida fans refer to Athletic as parasites, but parasites live either in or on other organisms, and benefit by deriving nutrients at their host's expense. In actual fact, Athletic are vultures, preying on the dying and dead and exploiting them for their own gain. Surprisingly though, they haven't gone with that as their nickname. In fact, the club doesn't even have a nickname insofar as I can tell, which is presumably because they don't really have any fans. Lleida CF, the direct descendants of UE Lleida, are highly likely to follow their ancestors, who once beat both Real Madrid and Barcelona in a La Liga season, in being liquidated and dissolved. Most people thought that it would already have happened by now. Luis Pereira described the club as being unviable in the Segunda Federación last season, and they are now in the 5th tier Tercera Federación, an officially semi-professional league where the majority of players are amateurs, and still without a guaranteed stadium next season. Lleida's relationship with La Paeria has only soured further under Pereira. Pereira and his deputy president, Marc Torres, have accused the mayor and the city of showing favouritism towards Athletic, despite Lleida CF having greater support among the city's residents. Lleida have filed a complaint via the courts, yes, another one, accusing La Paeria of influence peddling and falsifying documents. Felix La Rosa has served as Lleida's mayor since 2023, having also occupied the position from 2018 to 2019. La Rosa's father, Felix La Rosa Gaston, actually played for UE Lleida as a goalkeeper in the Segunda Division during the 1950s, but Lleida are unhappy that his chief of staff, Javier Batalla, was previously a director of rivals Atlètic Lleida. Mark Torres told our newspaper, quote, "He took up the municipal post in November 2023 and did not leave the club until March 2024. In June 2024, when the former sports director of Badalona Futuro, Lucas Viale, signed for Sabadell, he still thanked Batalla for everything that he had done for him the previous season when they were negotiating to unite the clubs. This benefits this club. That is why there is a rush to end the current agreement, which is still being challenged in court, and present this new agreement that opens the door to the Camp de Sports for Atlètic, the stadium that has been the home of Lleida since 1945. The opposition groups tell us that they do not understand the mayor's rush, and they defend us. In the city, demonstrations have been seen at the entrance to the stadium and in the city centre. The atmosphere in local football has become tense, waiting to see what happens with the agreement, the stadium, and whether a derby will be played next year. And where it would be played, of course." End quote. In case all of that wasn't messy enough, Batalla previously served as UE Lleida's marketing director from 1998 to 2000, a decade before the club was dissolved. In a controversial statement after buying Lleida CF Segunda Federación playing rights, Atlètic Lleida stated, quote, "We don't want anything that doesn't belong to us, but we don't give up anything at all either." End quote. They also flared tensions by announcing their season ticket sale under the slogan, "From Lleida for Lleida," rubbing further salt in the wounds by offering existing Lleida CF members the right to retain the same seat at the Camp de Sport next season if they switch to becoming Atlètic Lleida members next season instead. The whole situation, quite frankly, is a bitter and bloody mess. Atlètic Lleida can boast about keeping fourth-tier football in Lleida, but it is a weak brag when the city has previously hosted top-flight football, and one which rings hollow when they bought their fourth-tier status as opposed to earning it. What's more, they can buy promotion, as they've proved, but as Granada 74 proved over 15 years ago, it is much harder to buy supporters. And right now, Atlètic are doing an excellent job of alienating the community that they claim to hope to represent. For all of the talk of building bridges, if you really wanted to be accepted by a city's residents, buying the league place of their dying existing club with a modest but passionate fan base probably isn't a particularly good way to go about it. Lleida aren't blameless, of course. Atlètic didn't run them into the ground or amass €5 million in debt. Consecutive ruinous owners have done that all by themselves. Vultures don't tend to kill their prey after all, they just feast upon the dead. Atlètic are managed by Gabri, the former Barcelona midfielder and Spanish international, who managed Lleida in the 2021-22 season, and at the end of last month, Atlètic also took Lleida's captain and star man Joan Campins, along with their stadium and league position. Lleida are currently fighting for their lives. As the club claims to be appealing just about everything and fighting every battle via the courts, hundreds of supporters are taking out memberships in a bid to try and save them, with many more taking to the streets in protests and demonstrations. If Lleida CF go the same way as UE Lleida, some say they would rather found a Phoenix club, even if that means starting out in the 10th tier of Spanish football, in the depths of Catalonia's regional amateur leagues, than ever support Atlètic. A club which feels not only detached from them, but in direct opposition to everything they value and care about. These were the scenes, in 1993, when UE Lleida secured their first promotion to La Liga in over 40 years. That is how promotions are meant to be celebrated. Fans spilling out onto the pitch, crying with joy and embracing loved ones at the end of a long and arduous season in which every goal, point and league place mattered. Atlètic Lleida's promotions, for the most part, have been clinched in boardrooms and meetings with RFEF executives, far away from any supporters, few of whom even exist, and celebrated by men in suits, plotting their next move. They are like a distillation of everything that is wrong with modern football, and if not the direction in which the game is heading anymore, perhaps the depressing destination that we have already arrived at. From Manuel Azoz packing his shirt, shorts and boots into his briefcase, walking to a local green, and training alone until some children joined in, to Atlètic Lleida buying promotions for hundreds of thousands of euros. Football may have become the most popular sport in the world during that time, and to my mind still the best. But it is difficult not to conclude that something, somewhere, went badly wrong. That is it for today's video. I like to end on a positive note in most of my videos, so I'll just end this one by saying that at least syphilis is generally curable now because we have antibiotics. So, not everything has got worse. Thank God for the wonders of modern medicine. Or the people who work tirelessly on developing and discovering them, depending on your religious persuasions. I can tell that some of you are still thinking about modern football being a rancid, financialised dystopian hellhole, which is a real shame. Hey, you've always got me, on HITC Sevens and the Alfie Potsama YouTube channel, cutting through the noise to remind you time and time again that a new terrible thing has happened and how everything is worse than you already thought. You're welcome. Thank you all, as ever, for having such exquisite taste and for staying with me for this long in a video about 4th and 5th tier Spanish football clubs, though it is about more than that in some respects, I suppose. Hit the like button if you enjoyed today's video or found it remotely interesting, informative, or amusing. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and go ahead and subscribe to HITC Sevens and the Alfie Potsama YouTube channels. You know you want to. You can now support me additionally, if you are able and would like to support my work, both via the Alfie Potsama YouTube channel, where you can become a channel member, or via buymeacoffee.com/Alfie Potsama, where you can do the exact same thing, but Google won't take 30% of it. That's it for now, but I will catch you next time. Take care up there. Sorry if you heard my dog breathing rather loudly in the background today, but he had to be nearby, he's not very well. Try not to catch syphilis, keep on hating Atlètic Lleida. I love you all. Cheers.